All right. Good evening, everyone. We are still waiting. I think everyone is now in. Um, more people come in this evening, we'll be letting them in during the meeting here. But thank you all for being here. Thanks for taking time on a beautiful summer evening to be inside, learning a little bit more about being a precinct committee person. I hope that you'll take some information away from here tonight that is valuable to you and to the work that you'll be doing in this role. And certainly, happy to be able to provide this to you as well this evening. As we go through, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand, take yourself off of mute. I think you should be able to do that. Um, if not, just throw it into the chat as well, and we'll be happy to answer those questions as we go through. But I want to go ahead and get started. So obviously, the reason we're all here tonight is because either you were elected or have been appointed to be a precinct committee person after the primary in May. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for stepping up into this role to help out and build the Democratic Party here in York County. So we, as it says, we're excited that you're here. We're excited that you're part of this team, and we're hoping that tonight you'll take away learning a little bit more about what the responsibilities of being a precinct committee person will entail, just some information about how to strengthen the party through organizing here in York County, and some of the resources that are going to be available to you as well. So let's jump in right off the bat and start talking about kind of the structure of the party. Those of you that have been involved for a while know this. Some of you who are getting involved may have seen this in another presentation that we've done in the recent past. But this is really what the structure of the party looks like, both here in York County and beyond. And one of the things that we stress very heavily here is that even though the county precinct committee persons are at the bottom of this pyramid, they are the foundation of this pyramid. They are the individuals who are helping to stabilize and make sure that the party is strong from the ground up. So it's important for us to recognize that each and every one of you, as I said, is the foundation of this organization. Can everyone else hear me? Connie said she can.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm
Yes, I
not
can
sure.
hear you.
I can hear you fine also.
Okay, thanks. Not sure, Connie. Um, maybe it's on your end. I'm not sure.
Yes, I can hear you too.
Okay, thanks. All right. So, as I said, we do recognize that our county precinct committee people are the foundation of this party. It is the work that you are doing on the ground. It is the people that you are talking to on the ground. It is the voters that you are making contact with, who are going to be who support our candidates, who become our candidates, who support the party as a whole. So again, it is vital for us to really stress that you are that foundation. Just above in that pyramid is our regional directors. Many of you are aware that we have 10 regions here in York County that are broken out geographically. At the county reorganization meeting a few weeks ago, we elected those regional directors, and some of them have reached out to you already. Others I know are working on that, and we're going to be actually meeting and doing a similar orientation with them on Sunday night this weekend. So we're going to be connecting with them, and they'll be getting more details into how to help you and support you as the time goes on. The next level is then the county executive committee. That is inclusive of the regional directors as well as the elected leadership of the party, as well as the elected state committee members from York County. and various other committee chairs from within the party as well. And then, of course, above that is the Pennsylvania State Democrats and then the DNC. Many of you are aware, some of you may not be as well, that we don't get a lot of support, and I shouldn't say not a lot of support. We don't get a lot of assistance from the DNC or the Pennsylvania State Dems. We do get access to things like Vote Voter, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. We do work with the coordinated campaigns that come from each of those areas. But aside from that, we don't receive financial support. We don't receive necessarily any kind of volunteer support from those areas. So everything we do here in York County is a grassroots effort. And that is why, again, you as precinct committee people are so vital to what we do here in York County. So what does it mean to be a precinct committee person? The main responsibility for a precinct committee person is that you connect with the voters in your neighborhoods, in your precincts, in your general area that you were elected or appointed as a PCP. And you'll hear me kind of use PCP, precinct committee person. We'll go back and forth using that term tonight, but you know, the main focus here is that you are the voice of the party in your communities. You are the ones that are talking about getting people registered. You are talking about the candidates that are on the ballot. You are the individuals that folks reach out to when they have questions about the party itself, about who to vote for, those types of things. You are the ones that help us identify candidates when the time comes in your various areas. So next year, for example, with school boards and township elections, countywide elections, you will be helping us to recommend folks to run for those particular offices as well. So it is, again, an important role, but really the main thing that you need to take away from tonight is you are the boots on the ground. You are the volunteers, the grassroots volunteers who are helping to build the party both at the county level, but specifically within your precinct as well. So how do you do that? First is to recruit. Now, many of you, actually all of you at some point should have received I think it's called the rights and responsibilities of a precinct committee person. That sounds very official. But within that, you'll find a number of these things that we're talking about tonight. And the first is, you need to build your team. And the way to do that is to start to organize neighborhood leaders. Don't feel like you need to take all of this on yourself. As a precinct committee person, some precincts are smaller than others, some are much larger than others. And in many cases, it may seem overwhelming and daunting at first when you look at the numbers to think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all of these things and work in all of these areas? The key here is to divide and conquer. First of all, maybe you're in a precinct where there are 2 precinct committee people that have been elected or appointed. If that's the case, great. You already have 2 people. You already have a partnership that's going to be able to work in your particular precinct. Some of you are the only person right now in your precinct. And so, it'll be vital to try to identify somebody else who maybe will step up into that other precinct committee person role. And one of the ways to do that is to introduce folks as neighborhood leaders. And these are individuals who will adopt, maybe their block, maybe they'll take one street, take all the houses on one street. Maybe they're in a development. They feel comfortable reaching out to, a certain number of homes in their housing development. These are folks who are willing to say, I will be responsible for reaching out to 25 Democrats in my area, 25 of my neighbors, at least 3 times a year. And those 3 times a year typically are petitioning when we're trying to get candidates on the ballot, during the primary cycle to introduce candidates to those voters in those particular areas, and then during the general cycle as well to reach out and connect with those voters in those areas. they are going to be the folks that, you can go to them and say, okay, it's time to petition. Here are the petitions for the candidates. Go reach out to your neighborhoods. Go reach out to your blocks, your streets that you're the captains for, neighborhood leaders for. They are incredibly vital to, again, taking off some of those responsibilities of you for you as a precinct committee person. But they are also important to building that team and recognizing that you are not the only Democrat. They are not the only Democrat in those neighborhoods. Um, Another vital role in recruiting is to recruit poll greeters, poll watchers, and other volunteers for all the elections and primary elections. So poll greeters, those are the folks that stand outside. They hand the information out as voters go in. We heard this during the last cycle. There were a lot of the opposition out at the polls and handing out information, but not nearly as many Democrats. So we need folks to be able to hand out information and get the word out to our candidate, to our voters about our candidates. Poll watchers is a little bit different. Those are going to be folks that typically are stationed within the polling locations. And a lot of times we're working with our voter protection teams on our coordinated campaigns to get, to identify who those poll watchers are going to be. But those are the folks that are going to be inside the polling place, just making sure everything is running smoothly, making sure that everyone has the ability to vote if they show up to vote, making sure that, obviously everything is moving along inside the polling place the way that it should, but there's no intimidation, that there's no issues inside as well. So those are going to, I tell most folks, if you volunteer to be a poll watcher and you come out of it thinking that was the most boring job I've ever had, that means you had a really good day as a poll watcher because there were no issues. But they are vital to what we do. Other volunteers that are going to be needed around election time that you can get, volunteers from your precincts to help with. Putting signs out at your polling place, making sure that all of our candidate signs get to the polling place the night before, and then identifying someone to pick them up after the election is over that evening or that next morning. This is important as well. Again, sometimes just having those signs at the polling places builds energy. Folks are excited to see that there are Democrats, and this year we have 7 Democrats running for state house in 7 seats. We have a state Senate candidate in our state Senate seat, and we have congressional candidates as well, including our governor as well. Sean asked the question: are precinct committee folks permitted to work as poll workers? Absolutely. Now, I guess, Sean, to clarify, are you talking about poll workers that work that are hired through the county as poll workers, or?
Yes, I have been a poll worker, and Tracy DePasquale would be sad to not have me anymore. So I just wanted to confirm that I can still do that role, as a nonpartisan worker.
Yes, 100%. You can still do that. That's not an issue. There's actually a few people on here. Somebody else is a judge in Red Lion. I know we've got a couple other folks as well.
Oh, so you can be a judge too. All right, very good.
Yep.
That's good to know.
So what I would recommend in that case for those folks that are poll workers or that are judges of elections, that were elected as judges of elections, is to just make sure that as we're getting closer to the time, you've identified volunteers in your precinct who can help do these other tasks. And then, obviously, if you're inside the poll working that day, you're not going to necessarily be able to communicate with your volunteers. Just let us know that, and we'll make sure that we've got a communication plan worked out so that if there are issues, they can be reaching out to the county party office, to our voter protection team. There's a number of ways that we can work that out. But absolutely, 100%. And thank you all that are poll workers and judges of elections. Those are so desperately needed here in York County. I know the Board of Elections is always asking us closer to the election cycle. Do we have any idea of anyone that might be interested in doing that? Because they're in need of that. So thank you for doing that. They are vital to ensuring that our elections are fair and occur the way that they should. So in addition to that, the last thing that we have here is that you are, as I mentioned earlier, you are here to help us identify who our prospective candidates are as well. There is no one that knows your part of the county better than you. You are connected to sorry, Candace, I was reading your question here. I'll get to it just 1 minute here. So you are the ones that are going to help us identify those candidates. And like I said, especially in those local races, you may be on a doorstep of a voter that you've talked to, a number of times, who is just adamant that they want to see change on their school board. Have that conversation about, have you considered running for school board? Have you considered running for township supervisor? Follow through with them. And if they're not 100% sure, we do trainings through the party multiple times leading up to the petitioning cycle to talk about the different positions that are going to be on the ballot, what's entailed in each of those areas, what it takes to get on the ballot, run for those offices, those types of things. So please, make sure that you make a note somewhere that this person might be a great candidate for position X or position Y, because again, they are you are the eyes and the ears on the ground party, and you can help us fill in a lot of those gaps where a lot of times we don't have candidates that are running. So Candace asked the question, do we have up-to-date lists of registered Democratic voters by precinct? And the answer is yes, Candace. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can access those a little bit later on. So if at some point I don't answer that question, definitely yell at me and I'll make sure we get back to that. But
All right.
it should be coming up. So all right. So what else do you do as a precinct committee person? Well, you assist candidates with ballot petitions. We've already talked a little bit about how you can utilize neighborhood leaders and other volunteers in your area to help get folks on the ballot. Typically, the way that it has worked in the past is we will get petitions for candidates. We provide them in a shared file out to our regional directors, and then our regional directors should be sharing those out with the precinct committee people as well, kind of down that line. And then, ultimately then you will be asked to help get those candidate signatures to get on the ballot. Couple things to keep in mind when it comes to petitioning. Here in York County, we do not have an endorsement process. We do not endorse candidates. So if there are multiple candidates that are running for one position, we do ask that you carry those petitions with you. It is important that we remain neutral in that regard, and ensure that every candidate that wants to get on the ballot can get on the ballot. We just ask that you offer those up to folks when the time comes. As far as individual volunteers for campaigns, they can kind of do whatever they want. But as a precinct committee person, we just ask that you try to carry those with you. It is important also to know that some elections it's harder to get signatures than others. Next year, when we get into the townships and the school board races, you're only going to need a handful of signatures to get those candidates on the ballot. Whereas this year it was a little bit tougher because state house, state senate, our congressional candidates needed hundreds, if not thousands, of signatures. So it's important to just make sure that you have the volunteers that are capable of getting those as well. Is there continued petitioning in the fall, or is that just that is really just kind of that is something that happens typically February and March, beginning of starts kind of the middle of February, runs through the middle of March. The only time that is different is in presidential cycle years, and that is when then the calendar adjusts a little bit, and we typically do petitioning January into February. Most of you will probably have done this before, who have done this before, will say the same thing that I do, and that is they couldn't pick a worse time of year for us to go out and knock doors than really the dead of winter. There have been times where we've had to encounter snow, we've had to encounter ice, to get out and get those signatures. But yeah, the petitioning themselves to get candidates on the ballot, usually there's that window of time there within the first couple of months of the year. So good question. Other responsibilities, register Democratic voters. As you are going through your neighborhoods, if you encounter folks that are not registered, you should always have a stack of registration forms available, and we can get you as many of those as you need. We can get you kind of an endless supply if you need them. But also make sure you have that site saved on your phone somewhere, so that if you're out and talking to someone and they say, I'm not registered, or I want to change my party affiliation, or I just moved here and I need to register in this area, you can call up your phone, you can hit that site, and they can register right online. We'll give you some other materials as well. We can even create buttons that have a QR code on them that just says, scan to register, and folks can scan those themselves and do that. So anything that you need like that, let us know, and we will definitely make sure that you have those the actual physical voter registration forms as well. Something I'm going to suggest, and this is something, especially if you have a number of volunteers in your area that can help with this. We used to have a person that, and they may still do that, I'm not sure if they do or not, but actually used to watch the deed transfers in the newspaper. And anytime somebody new was moving into their neighborhood, they would just send them a voter registration form in an envelope and say, I'm the Democratic committee person for your precinct. Welcome to the neighborhood. If you're not registered, here's a registration form. If you are registered but you need to change your address, you can do that on the same form. You can request a mail-in ballot on that form. And it was just a way to kind of have that initial contact with folks when they first moved into the neighborhood as well. And then provide them information to say, if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk to you. Here's my number, here's my email address, whatever. But it's a way to, just kind of keep track of new folks that are moving into neighborhoods and making sure that they are registered as well. And then the last thing is it says conduct voter contact activities. And that's going to just be doing that outreach to those voters, whether it's talking about candidates, whether it's just making yourself known that you're there. I have a neighbor in our neighborhood that every year calls me before the primary election and says, "Who should I vote for? Who on the ballot should I consider voting for this year?" Because they know who I am, they know that I'm involved with the party, and that's the kind of thing that we hope that you can establish in your neighborhoods as well, is having that contact where folks are confident that they can reach out to you, or at least know who you are and be able to identify if they have a question to come to you as the precinct committee person. Some other things, attend any meetings when called by the regional directors. Your regional directors may hold meetings from time to time. I know some folks have already, as part of getting recruited to be a precinct committee person, have already met with their regional directors, either in advance of the primary or since the primary, and that's great. Some regional directors may just communicate through email, text, through telephone. Others, like I said, may want to do meetings. That kind of is at the discretion of the regional director, but they should be having consistent contact with you as a precinct committee person. But if there are meetings, obviously attend those. Attend any development workshops when offered. We do a lot of different workshops throughout the year for things like how to petition, like I said, how to run as a candidate for specific offices. Trying to think, we will do poll training for folks that are going to be poll greeters and poll watchers. We will do trainings for those individuals as well. So throughout the year, we've got a number of different workshops that we offer as the county party. The state party does offer what they call deminars. Those usually are around the time of our state committee meetings. And a lot of times they've got some really good information as well. So kind of keep an eye out for those. And we will definitely promote the workshops as frequently as we can, both on social media and through email blasts. We will make sure that we have a listserv kind of set up for our precinct committee folks so that we can just send you information when it becomes available for those workshops as well. And then the last thing is attend any county conventions or other meetings as called in accordance with the bylaws. So many of you, who were elected were able to attend, and some that got appointed were able to attend our county reorganization meeting a few weeks ago. And that's the county convention. But actually in our bylaws, it says that we, throughout the year should be meeting multiple times as the full county committee. Anytime we talk about the county committee, that is you as precinct committee persons, our regional directors, our team, and our state committee members all together. Typically, we do one meeting at the beginning of the year. We call it our campaign kickoff. It is kind of coming out of the holidays, coming out of the winter months, getting ready for petitioning. It's usually right before petitioning begins, and that is considered a county committee meeting. And then typically we try to do another in the fall, closer to the general election, usually September, October time range as well. And then, potentially there may be others as if things arise, but those are kind of the ones that we're looking at most frequently throughout the year. So not a huge commitment, to attend those meetings. Not like you have to be at every meeting like once a month, but it is a mandatory meeting when we do call them. So we do ask that if you can be there, to be there. If not, try to send a proxy, and we provide all that information at the time of the meeting. So how do you help our team? How do you help the Democrats in general? We'll maintain that regular contact with your neighborhood leaders and other precinct volunteers. I just talked a minute ago about how it's important for our regional directors to stay in contact with our precinct committee folks. Well, as a precinct committee folk, if you are recruiting folks to be neighborhood leaders or other volunteers in your precinct, don't recruit them and then not follow up with them or talk to them or connect with them throughout the cycle. There will be times when it is much busier than others. Obviously, as we get into a primary in the spring, as we get into the general election in the fall, those get to be busier times, and you're going to be communicating with your volunteers more frequently. But in those off times of year as well, whether it's after the elections are over the summer, like right now, it's important to still be connecting with those volunteers, still encouraging them to be talking to other voters in their neighborhoods. Again, starting to identify candidates for the next cycle. We're always looking at least a cycle or two ahead of where we currently are. So, we obviously have a huge election coming up this November with our state house, our state senate, and our congressional candidates locally. But we're also thinking about who's running next year, who's running for township supervisors, school boards, and so on, and who's going to be running the year after that. So, kind of continue to have those conversations with your volunteers and your leaders in some of those more down times throughout the year. Make sure that you are getting the necessary materials to be able to distribute to your poll greeters and your poll watchers for each election. Typically, our offices are going to be open usually the entire weekend and the Monday before an election. Elections are always on Tuesday. So it's typically, we're open at least those full 3 days ahead of time so that you can pick up materials and get that to your greeters and your watchers. It's also worth your while if you can't make it to get to one of those times when we have the stuff available, to just let us know, and we'll make sure that we have either we get the materials to you or we'll set up another time for you to get those materials. And that includes everything from the rack cards that you'll be handing out about candidates to the signs for the polls, any materials that you might need as a poll watcher. So anyone that is a poll watcher inside the poll will need to get a poll watcher certificate. And that is just something from the county that certifies that you are allowed to be, as part of the Democratic Party, you are allowed to be in the polls watching what is happening. The way that they do that now, and I know a number of you have done this in the past, but the way they do it now is that we need to know who those poll watchers are in advance. We give that information to the county. They then generate the poll watcher certificates for us, and then they get them back to us to distribute to our volunteers that will be in the polls. So we do need that information, obviously, before the weekend, before the election. So we'll be asking for that, and that's just for people that are inside the polls. But we do need to get that information a little bit earlier than we did in the past. Used to be we would just get a stack of blank poll watcher certificates, and we could actually fill them out and give them out as we needed to. But now the county elections office does require us to give that information in advance. And then the last thing is monitor and provide feedback to your neighborhood leaders. As they're out talking to volunteers, if they're hearing, I'll give you a great example. Right now, we're seeing so many townships that are having hearings about data centers here in York County. And maybe you're not aware of it, but if you're having a conversation with a neighborhood leader that says, "Hey, did you hear that, this township's going to be putting this on their agenda coming up? I really think it's important that, we have a presence there, or we get some folks out to talk about this." That's the way to get that information from your volunteers. Share that information with your regional, share that information with our executive team at the party, and we can help get that information out as well. But that's the kind of dialogue we want you to have, recognizing if there's an issue that's coming up in your neighborhood that we can talk about and we can promote. And again, I go back to that candidate recruitment aspect. If your neighborhood leaders are out there talking to folks and they identify a really strong candidate, we want to be able to talk to them as early as possible. So having, again, that communication and that feedback is important. So as a precinct committee person, there are a couple special roles that you play that don't happen frequently, but they do happen. And one of those has already happened, and that's our county reorganization. So as an elected precinct committee person, after the primary election, those that are elected are then able to elect the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, and the treasurer for the county party for the next 4 years. Some of you were appointed after that reorganization meeting, and that's because the way our bylaws are written, it says that once the primary happens, we are not allowed to appoint any precinct committee people until the new leadership team is in place. And that's just so that we can't stack the deck in those couple of weeks between the primary and the reorganization. But if you after your time as a precinct committee person this time, you decide you want to keep doing it, you petition to get on the ballot, or you do a write-in to get on the ballot in 4 years, and you do it again, you'll have the opportunity to be part of that county reorganization process. Committee people are the individuals who will vote on any bylaw changes for the Democratic Party. If you were at the reorganization meeting, you received a copy of the bylaws. After tonight, we will also provide a digital copy to everyone. So if you're not if you weren't at the reorganization, you will get access to the digital file for the bylaws. But anytime there is a bylaw change, the way the process works is there is a committee within our executive team that reviews bylaw changes. They make a recommendation to the executive team. The executive team then moves that forward to the county committee for a vote. So when we have those county committee meetings, if there are bylaw changes that come up, you will know about them well in advance. You'll be able to ask questions about them well in advance. And then we will take a vote at those meetings. So that is something that, again, doesn't happen frequently. I honestly think the last time we had a bylaws change was 4 years ago at our reorganization meeting. But as we have kind of identified over time, we try not to do just like one change at a time. We try to do a bunch of them at a time if they come up, so that we're not convening meetings every couple of weeks just for bylaws. So as you look at those bylaws, if something stands out as this doesn't seem procedurally the way that it should be, just let us know. We can take that to our bylaws team and they can have a discussion and kind of talk to you individually and see about potentially making those changes as well. And then the last special role, again, many of you probably will serve as a precinct committee person and never have to fall into this. But when a special election is called, specifically for state house, state senate, congressional races, if there's a special election called because somebody drops out of a race, if there is someone who's on the ballot that decides they're not running anymore and they drop off the ballot and there's a vacancy, we will be asked to choose a candidate as the precinct committee people for that particular area. Greatest example of this is we just had a special election on primary day in District 196 of the State House. We, I guess it was in March, once we were notified that there's an actual special election that's going to happen, we then held a nominating meeting. We had interested candidates come to that meeting, and anyone that was a precinct committee person in that region at that time then it votes on who that candidate will be moving forward. Sometimes it's only one person that puts their name forward. It makes the job a lot easier. A number of years ago, I believe it was in the 93rd State House, we had, I think, 6 candidates that were running to get their name on the ballot. So our committee people were really important in selecting who that person is going to be, because that vote then by the precinct committee people goes to the state party executive team, and then they vote yes or no on the nominee that's put forward to be on the ballot. So you have a lot of sway as a precinct committee person if a special election comes up in that nomination process. So again, it doesn't happen frequently. It's a lot of quick turnaround when it does happen. And certainly you will have plenty of time to be aware of when a nomination meeting will happen. But it does happen from time to time, but not too frequently. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that you're going to get access to. So first of all is Vote Builder / Minivan. We put these together because they are the same thing essentially. One is just the digital app that you can use on your phone. One is going to be the more comprehensive system that you can build lists from. And this goes back to, Candace, your question earlier about updated voter lists in your particular precinct. So what we have the capability of doing is in Vote Builder, we will assign you specifically as a precinct committee person your precinct. So you will get access to Vote Builder to go in and be able to see all voters in your precinct. That includes Democrats, that includes Republicans, that includes independents, and anyone that's registered others. So Green, Libertarian, Jedi Party. I think there's still a few Jedi Party people out there here in York County. But you will have access to be able to pull those lists. And from that, then it's Vote Builder. Sorry. Whoops. Don't want to go there yet. Sorry. So Vote Builder, that is, like I said, that is the it's an incredibly dynamic tool because anyone that is knocking doors, that's having conversations, should be entering data into Vote Builder to identify issues, how voters are going to be voting, you know, so that can help candidates, because all candidates get access to their districts in Vote Builder. It helps us as a party to start to identify where candidates will be, where potential volunteers are, where potential donors might be, that type of thing as well. Initially, your access, like I said, will be for your precinct, and we'll send you kind of a really basic how-to build a list. Just create a list of the voters in your district, and it will show you. Initially you can break it down as to just Democrats and Republicans and others, or you can, if you're familiar with Vote Builder, you can get a lot deeper into the data there, and we can give you more advanced training on that as well. But for the purposes of what you're doing, to get those voter contact lists, to get their phone numbers, in some cases to get email addresses, but specifically to get their physical addresses if you're going to be knocking doors, that information is all going to be there as well. Minivan then is, like I said, the digital kind of app that will allow you to build a list. And instead of having to print it out on paper like we used to, you can assign it a minivan number. And then when you go into the minivan app and you put that number into the app, it will call up your voter list, your walk lists, your voter contact list, so that if you're out on the doorstep, you can literally have your phone in your hand. You can have that voter's information right there in your hand. If you talk to them and they say you're doing a voter ID or a candidate ID walk, you can ask them, are you supporting Josh Shapiro for governor? And if they say yes, 100%, you can click them as a strongly support. If they say, I'm not really sure yet, I haven't decided, you can list them as an undecided. Or if they say, hell no, I'd never vote for him, I'm voting for the Republican, you can mark that in there as well. Again, why that is important is because it helps us to target who needs to be talked to, who can be persuaded, and who that we don't need to bother with at all. During those downtimes that I talked about earlier, when your neighborhood leaders and your other volunteers are going to be out talking to their neighbors, a good thing to do is ID the issues, do issue ID, and just have them, what is the main issue that you're focused on right now? Is it the economy? Is it schools? Is it, another issue altogether? And again, by identifying that in the system, that allows you to be able to then target those voters better when it comes time for the candidates to talk to them, when it comes time to do outreach to get those voters out to the polls as well. Like I said, when we give you access, initially we will provide you like a very basic how-to of how to create a list, so that very simply, Candace, what you were asking about getting a voter registration list, you'll be able to pull that yourself from utilizing those directions. If you would like to have more advanced training, we will work with our Vote Builder administrator to see if we can get more advanced training set up, so that you can start to get in there and do a little bit more with that data as well. I always tell folks, sorry,
I say, you know me, so I'm ready.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say, we tell folks all the time, Vote Builder is only as good as the data that is put into it. So it is critical for us to put that information in. if we can go to a candidate and say, look in Vote Builder and see that we've already identified, 200 people who said 100% they're going to vote for the Democrats, that means you don't have to spend as much time and as many resources on outreaching to those voters. You do want to reach out to them, but for our candidates, where they need to be focused on is those kind of folks that are on the fence or that can be persuaded to vote for them. And that kind of work happens over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight to get all of that data into the system. But as you build your network, as you get more volunteers, we can give even more finite access to Vote Builder down to, I was going to say down to the street. I don't know if we can do down to the street yet, but I know we can get very small in the access that people have. So if you have neighborhood leaders that want to get access, we can get that for them as well. I talked earlier about virtual trainings and info sessions. Those are critical. Just kind of keep an eye out for those. And as we send more data out about those dates will kind of happen throughout the year. They're not mandatory. Most of the time, we typically record them and we do post them on our YouTube page. If you go to our YouTube page now, there's actually some how-to info sessions and virtual trainings that exist there. On things like door knocking and petitioning and those types of things. So you can access some previous ones, but if you want a newer one or a refreshed one, we will be doing those as those things come up on the calendar. The last thing I want to mention is precinct profiles. So again, this is something that if you came to the reorganization meeting, you should have received a precinct profile in your folder for your precinct if you were an elected precinct committee person. Those that were appointed since then, again, we are going to send you a link after this so that you can look at those precinct profiles and you have your information for your individual precinct. But we did post an example here. Jen, I will get to that in just a minute. I'll share out the YouTube channel as well. So this is a precinct profile, and you're lucky enough that I pulled my precinct profile. This is Manchester 3. I live in Manchester 3. So what we have done is in each one of your precincts, we have compiled the information in the first block that shows total registration. So you'll see how many Democrats there are that are registered in your precinct. You'll see Republicans, independents, others. And then that bottom number, this in my case, negative 949, means we have a 949 vote deficit for Democrats in my precinct versus all other registered voters. That's not just a deficit against the Republicans. That's if you count Republicans, independents, others all together. You'll see, obviously, it's about 400 some, I guess, difference in Republicans versus Democrats. But again, this is all registered voters. As we know, not all voters that are registered vote. So this is not saying that that's how many people are going to come out and vote in your precinct. This is literally just saying these are the registration totals. The next piece of information that is on this is going to show you what the turnout looked like in 2014, 2018, and 2022. And those cycles were the last 3 gubernatorial cycles. So 22, when Governor Shapiro was elected, 2018, when Governor Wolf was reelected, and 2014, when Governor Wolf was first elected. And this is what the turnouts look like in those districts total, not just Democrat, not just Republican. This is the total turnout in your particular precinct during those cycles. The next thing then is we take a look at this is our way of trying to anticipate how many voters are going to vote in 2026. And that is based on a kind of a combination of all 3 of the turnouts from the previous elections. You can see the lowest being that lowest turnout, the highest being the highest turnout So it's kind of an average of the three is what we are looking at here. From that, then we determine what is the vote total. That is, or what is the win total, I should say. And that is going to be 50% plus one. How do you get to, how many votes does a candidate need in your precinct to win your precinct, essentially? So, whoever your state house candidate, if you have a state senate, whoever your congressional candidate is, this is the number that they need out of your precinct to win. That first one is the 50% plus one. As I like to tell people all the time, that's way too close. We know the Republicans will raise hell if we only win by one vote. We'll never hear the end of voter fraud and all that stuff. So we want to try to get a higher total than that. So the next number, that 590 or 696 that you see here, is the 52% of the estimated vote total for my precinct. So, that doesn't seem unreasonable, that we need to get 696, voters in my precinct to vote to get our candidate, to vote for our candidate to win, until you look at the fact that we have 946 registered Democrats. That means that 2/3 of the Democrats have to come out and vote for our candidate, at least, and that may or may not happen. It may happen more easily with the work that you all are doing. Then we take a look at the average of the candidate that did the worst in each of these cycles. And I apologize, my numbers on here are wrong. Those should be 22, 18, and 14 as well. But on average, the worst a candidate has done on the ballot in my precinct is they've received 34.78% of the vote. Not great, but at the same time, not the worst it could possibly be either. The next number you see then is the expected number of votes for Democrats. So again, we're taking this average, the average that we're figuring out for the worst candidate. We are taking that into consideration with the Democratic registration. And so our estimate is, in my district anyway, in my precinct, 465 Democrats, 465 votes are going to be guaranteed for the Democratic candidate. So then the little bar goes away here. So at the very bottom of the screen here, there it is. The win number, the expected number of votes for Democrats, that is the number that you have to convince in your precinct of people to vote for the Democratic candidate. That number above it, that 465, is how many we need to talk to just to get to the base number of who we think will vote for Democrats. That 205 then is that additional number of voters that you should be reaching out to, that your neighborhood leaders, that your block captains, your other volunteers, who they should be reaching out to try to convince them. So when you're talking to folks in your precinct, it's important to kind of keep that number in the back of your head. That 696 is important. Obviously, that's the total that you want to get to. But at least 205 people that normally wouldn't vote, who maybe normally are undecided, who potentially are other parties, that's where you're going to be pulling that number from. Or it's 205 more Democrats that you have to convince to vote as well. In my case here in my district, say that those 465 are all Democrats that are voting. I need to convince another 205 Democrats to come out and vote that typically wouldn't vote in this cycle. Or I need to convince independents, or I need to convince Republicans to come out and vote as well. So that frames it a little bit better in each of your areas of an idea of how many voter contacts, how many people you should be talking to. And again, some of you are going to see much bigger numbers here than others. Others are going to see, smaller numbers where there's a higher Democratic registration and a lower difference between the voter totals. And And some of you are going to see higher numbers where Republicans come out and vote more. Um, this number is not to scare you away. It is not to make you feel overwhelmed. It's not to make you feel like, oh, this is an impossible task. But it is to give you a realistic idea of, based on previous voter habits, based on voter turnout in previous elections, and based on formulas that we've adapted from other campaigns and other cycles. This is the number that we think, is what you need to be working towards in each of your precincts. If you're able to, in Manchester 3, identify another 205 voters, maybe who typically wouldn't vote for our candidate, to vote for them, that gives that candidate that much better of a chance of winning in that particular precinct. Again, it's a little bit complicated. Yes, Lester, thank you for that question. This is available. It is going to be available at all the precinct levels, and we do have it broken down by each of the regions. So we'll share that with you. Lester is our regional director for Region 4, and we do have each of the precincts for each region available for our regional directors as well. So we'll make sure you have that to refer to. That's a lot of information on the screen right now. Does anybody have any questions? And certainly, again, it's one of those things that if you do have a question after you take a look at it, and you want to kind of start to figure out how to build out that plan and that strategy, that's, again, something we can help work with you on, or that your regionals will be able to help with as well, to help build out those strategies too.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah. Well, first off, I don't know if everybody ordered cards, but I have cards. And one of the things I'm really trying to do is get email addresses and telephone numbers for everybody that I talk to, because it's a heck of a lot easier to send out a blast to them as opposed to, stopping by their house another time.
Yes.
So giving out cards, I think, is important. And then with the Republicans, like the last session when I canvassed, there was a lot of people, there were a lot of Dems that were like all fed up with the inflation, and we're all mad about inflation, and they said they weren't going to vote, they weren't going to vote for Kamala. They were going to vote for Trump. Well, I suspect after this, debacle that he's gotten into, a lot of those people are going to come back in. Now, I should have marked them, but because I was in all different districts, but I have no way of knowing whether they changed parties or whether they just, got mad and voted for Republican that time. But since so many people are mad, how do you have a recommendation for speaking with Republicans that are frustrated by the gas prices, the food prices, the housing prices, the car prices?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, Robin. Thank you for that. So one thing that we can do, as you indicated there, as you knocked doors previously, we identify who kind of said, no, I'm voting for Trump, no, I'm voting for Kamala, no, I'm undecided. And we have that data as well for previous gubernatorial campaigns, for previous Senate campaigns. So we can start to kind of target down some of those lists. And that's where, to really get in the weeds of Vote Builder for a second, Vote Builder allows you to actually identify scores of likely voters. And what I mean by that is, if over the course of a period of time, a voter said 100% of the time they're voting for a Democrat, they're going to probably have 100% score that they're definitely a dependable voter for a Democratic voter. But as volunteers talk to voters over time, they, I don't know, say in 2022, we talked to a Republican that said, I am 100% going to vote for Josh Shapiro. I'm going to 100% in 2022 vote for John Fetterman. um, that then raises that Republican score a little bit to say this is potentially somebody that we can have a conversation with. The same is true on the opposite side of what you're saying, Robin, and that was 2 years ago in 2024 when volunteers were talking to voters. If we had a Democrat or we had an independent or we had Republican that said, nope, I'm voting for Trump 100%, that's it. That then kind of lowers their score a little bit as well. So based on those scores, we can really get in and start to target what is who is a potential undecided voter or a potential persuadable voter. And that's, we can kind of work with you to help identify some of those voters. We 100% agree with you. I mean, what we've seen thus far in most special elections across the country, what we've seen even just in our primaries back in May, is that Republicans are turned off right now. We know that Trump's base is not going to come out for this cycle. They do not come out when he's not at the top of the ticket. So those kind of diehard MAGAs are not going to be voting this year. And that means that those that are probably going to be those ones that are a little bit more persuadable because they know, they can kind of reverse a bad decision from 2 years ago by coming out and voting differently this time. So, we definitely can help create those lists and help work through those lists with you. That's one of the things we'll work with our regional directors as well to help get them trained up in that, how to do that so that they can work with you one-on-one as well if need be. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of voters that, were turned off after the last cycle that will either not vote or will reverse kind of how they voted this last time. The only other thing I will say there too is, when you are talking to voters, whether it's during a campaign, whether it's an off cycle, outside of the cycle, you really should be talking to Democrats and independents. Don't exclude the independents. The independent numbers, you can, they are making a significant increase all across the country. Here in York County, those independent numbers continue to climb. Those are former Republicans that are tired of the Republican Party. There are former Democrats that are tired of the Democratic Party. But they are folks that are persuadable. And we can win elections if we have those conversations with those independents. So it used to be the strategy, try to turn out as many Democrats as possible. The reality, and as we know in most of our districts and most of our precincts here, just turning out Democrats is not going to win an election for our campaigns. We need to turn out those independents. And as you've already identified, we need to turn out some of those persuadable folks that voted the other way the last time around as well. And Sean, you're absolutely right too. We do have a young voter problem as well. The Democrats have a young voter issue. Most younger voters are registering as independents. And that's, again, another reason why it's important for us to have these conversations with them. The reality is too, independents a lot of times get turned off because here in Pennsylvania, it's a closed primary. And so independents don't get to vote in the primary. And as a result, that means when they do have a chance to vote in November, they're kind of stuck with who the two parties picked as their candidates. They didn't have a say in it. So that's, again, another reason why it's important to be having those conversations with those independents, in kind of the non-campaign part of the year, so that you can start to have, a little bit more persuasion maybe with some of the candidates or convincing them to run as well. That's all right, Sean. We all have those horror stories. I don't know if you can see in the chat, Sean mentioned that she registered a voter in 2024 who turned around and voted for Trump. So the other side of the coin is here is that when we talk about voter registration, we cannot exclude how a person registers. We certainly cannot, dictate how they vote. So we do have to register all voters. So when I talked about, when a new person moves into the neighborhood, maybe there's a chance that you're going to be giving them a voter registration form, and they're going to turn around and register as a Republican and potentially vote for Stacey Garrity this time, for Scott Wagner, for Lloyd Smucker, Lord forbid. But we do want to make sure that we're trying to register as many Democrats as possible, but at the same time, we don't have any control over that. So unfortunately, not yet anyway. I saw earlier there was a question I think Becky had about rack cards. We are working with the state party right now. The state party typically generates rack cards for each of our areas so that you will get rack cards that will have the governor, the lieutenant governor, your congressional candidate, and then your specific state house or state senate candidate in your region, so that you're not necessarily needing to carry 15 pieces of literature with you. You will have literature that the state party has given us. I don't have a date on that. So in the interim, what we are going to do is we are going to create those on our own. They're not going to be nice, fancy, glossy rack cards. But I will give a shout out to our Northern Democrats here who they have created in the past just a small sheet that lists out all of the candidates, a slate card that can be handed to people when you're out knocking doors. Those that are in the Northern region, in Region 1, Nikki and her team up there do an amazing job in getting that information out to folks. So you can, check with her. They will have theirs already created. And then we're going to be creating those for folks down ballot as well, or for other regions, I should say, as well, until we get the nicer looking ones that will be coming hopefully in the next few weeks. Okay. So after all of that, what are our goals? What are kind of some of the simple things that we're hoping that we can work on here? First, if you are the only precinct committee person in your precinct, we want you to try to work on finding somebody else to help lessen the load for you. So find that second person. It might be a neighbor, might be a spouse. They might be unwilling, but you can sometimes twist their arms. Or, it may be another volunteer that just as you're out talking to people and getting to know people, they will give you, they'll be able to give you the, that idea of, yes, I do want to help volunteer in this way. So absolutely, that's first priority if you're the only one. Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, Kathy, I was reading your question there. Kathy asked, we've done trainings in the past for volunteers. We've done kind of a monthly information session to try to get volunteers involved. Absolutely. We have all of that information that we can just generate that and pass that along to you if there are folks in your precinct that have participated that maybe want to volunteer. We absolutely can pull that together and send that out to you as well. So that's a great suggestion. Let me write it down so I don't forget it. But no, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. A couple of the other goals that we're looking at as well. That's a great as well, Alana. There's a lot of, if you look at the Board of Elections website for the county, and you look at the voter totals for this past election, for the primary election, there's a lot of people that get written in or write their own names for precinct committee person. And if they've got a couple of votes, you have to have 10 votes to win that election. If you so you have to 10 votes to win that as a write-in, but we have some folks that maybe got 5 write-ins or maybe got maybe even 3 write-ins. check that list because, and Alana, that's a great suggestion. That will allow you to maybe find some folks in your area that were interested. They started to get some support, but maybe just didn't get enough. And they might be interested in helping out as well. So that's a great suggestion. And Sandra, you asked, where can you find the forms for someone who is seeking a precinct committee person? There is on the York Dems website under the About Us tab, I believe it is. There's a tab for committee persons. If you go to that, there's a form on there that folks can fill out if they're interested in applying to be appointed as a precinct committee person. There's some other information on that page as well, but that form is at the bottom. And I will make sure that we send that link out to everyone as well so that you have it. Yes, do we need more committee folks? John, yes, 100%. Yes, yes, yes. Also on that same page that I just referenced, there is a link that will take you to a list of every place that we do not have a precinct committee person. That's a live document so that as we appoint new folks, the precinct will come off of that list. As we've appointed some of you, your regions maybe have come off that list. But yes, we have only about a third of our precinct committee slots filled. It is a problem that every county in the Commonwealth faces in getting folks to fill those slots. But there is an up-to-date list there that will tell you where we need folks to fill in. Back to the goals, just to if in talking about the precinct committee people, these were good questions on where you kind of find some resources to maybe recruit some other folks. We're asking recruit 3 to 5 neighborhood leaders. You can obviously recruit more than that. As we said earlier, neighborhood leaders should be reaching out to about 25 voters on a regular basis in their neighborhoods. So we're talking anywhere from 75 to 125 voters that those neighborhood leaders will be connecting with on a regular basis. But at the same time, feel free, please, to try to recruit, more neighborhood leaders than that. It is not an official title, a neighborhood leader. But if somebody wants to be designated as a neighborhood leader and they want that title, by all means, bestow that on them. That would be great. So, thank you, Alana. There's the link for the election results where you can see where folks were written in. And then for the PCP, the committee person page, the link is there as well. Thank you, Alana. Appreciate that. Recruit volunteers to staff the polls. We talked about this already, but try to make sure that you have folks that can cover the polls as poll greeters from the time polls open at 7 a.m. to the time polls close at 8 p.m. If you cannot get people to do the whole day or enough people to do the whole day, key times to make sure you have coverage are first thing in the morning from like 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. when folks are off to work. Around lunchtime, so maybe like 11 to 1, 11 to 2, and then basically about 4 to 5 p.m. to the end of the poll when the polls are open at 8 p.m. That will give you coverage during some of the heavier times, but certainly if you can get volunteers to cover the entire time, that way you're not going to miss any voters as they're coming into the polls. We want you to try to identify one candidate for the next cycle. This does not have to be anyone we're not saying that person has to commit. But if as you're talking to folks over the next couple of months, if you start to connect with someone who maybe is interested in running, make sure that you identify them, make sure you let us know, let your regional directors know, let us as the exec team know, and we can get them tied into some of the trainings that we're going to be doing, some of the information sessions that we're going to be doing, and then hopefully make them a full-fledged candidate, not just a potential candidate. And again, it can be for anything. The next cycle coming up is another municipal cycle. So we're going to have, obviously a lot of those local township supervisor, township auditor races, borough councils, mayors, school board races, and then we'll have quite a few countywide races as well next time as well. So again, if you know somebody who might be interested, keep them engaged, but also make sure that you're sharing that information with us. And then work with your regional directors on your total voter contact goals, and that's going to come from that precinct profile that we looked at, and then the regional directors, when we meet with them in a couple of days, they are going to be focused on helping to develop those goals for you and work with you, I should say, in your particular area. So those are kind of just some of the base goals that we have for you moving forward.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that, like when you talk about what the issues, what I find is, people that are engaged, they know what their issues are, but people that are less engaged, like I would love if we had a list of issues that we could just say, look through, like they might have one right off the bat, like, gas prices are too high or something like that. But I would love if we had a list of issues of common issues that we could say, do any of these hit home with you? And especially if we had issues that, I mean, I'm obviously not a young person, and I would think that young people have different issues, have different things that are important to them, than senior citizens or people in the middle. So, I think that would be helpful as well. If the Dems as a whole kind of know these are the issues that are really hitting home, then that would be good to find those out.
Yeah, that's a good point, Robin. And actually, within Vote Builder, we do have answers to questions that you can identify different issues within Vote Builder that are key issues. So maybe what we can do is actually pull up that list and provide that to you. So those are ones that you could offer up as potential issues. I would also say too, as a precinct committee person, and we didn't say this here, but this is a good chance to provide a little bit of education on the process and the issues as well, because certainly there are certain things that are universal. When someone says education might be an issue for them, that could be everything from a school board level position all the way up to president, that education is an issue. But there are some issues that are specific to our federal candidates versus our state candidates. There are some issues that, if you're running to be a tax collector and someone asks you, what's your stance on abortion? Probably not an issue that you're going to be facing as a tax collector. I don't think, anyway. I don't think the Republicans have politicized that position quite to that point yet, but they will. So, kind of just helping to identify, this is an issue that, yes, a state house candidate might be more in tune with than, say, a school board candidate, or, sometimes that helps. Next year, we may have some judicial candidates on the ballot. And a lot of times folks do not know what the different levels of the judiciary system are here in Pennsylvania, from the state courts down to our local courts. And so it's an opportunity to have conversations with voters just to say, look, this is what this court does. This is maybe how you could be affected by decisions from this particular court. And when you say, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, it is not the U.S. Supreme Court. So when they hear decisions coming out of the Supreme Court, at the federal level, it's a good opportunity to kind of share that's not necessarily what's coming out of the state Supreme as well. So definitely use this position as a way to help kind of educate voters. And that's where, to your point, Robin, having a list of those issues that might be key, that, sometimes voters will just say, I don't know, I don't know what maybe is my key issue, or some, being able to, like you said, have that list and say, is there something on here, that really stands out? I think would be useful as well. We can definitely, like I said, if nothing else, we can pull that from the list of survey questions that are in Vote Builder, and give you kind of an idea of what is already in the system. And then if there's anything that folks want to add as well, we can definitely add to that.
Thanks.
All right. So contact, who do you follow up with at this point? As I put here, your first call, email, text about questions should be to your regional director. Now, I will say, give them a couple days. They're going to have their orientation here in a few days. So once they get through their orientation and their onboarding, like I said, if they haven't reached out to you already, they will be. So just be patient for a few more days, and they should be able to connect with you. But definitely reach out to them for really anything. If it's specifically for the question about rack cards and slate cards earlier, if you don't have those in your hand, check with your regional director. If they don't have them in their hands, then they can come back to the exec team, to our headquarters volunteers. They can get those supplies that way. That would be your first direct contact. If you have any basic questions, things about any upcoming events, general information about just really anything, you can always reach out to our main headquarters number there, or to our info@yorkdems.org email address, and someone will be able to respond to that. And then at any point in time, if you have issues reaching out to your regional director, or you feel like you're not getting what you need from that level, then I would say, reach out to me, reach out to a member of our executive team. All of our information is on the website now. Email addresses are there. So you can reach out to folks on that executive team if you don't feel like you're getting the responses that you need from your regional. But like I said, don't do that yet. Give your regionals a couple of days yet. We'll get them acclimated, and then moving forward from there, then you can follow that protocol. Events, we just throw this up here. If you go to yorkdems.org/events, or you follow that QR code, there's lots of events that happen on a regular basis. Sometimes they're regional. So if I see Connie on my screen here. Connie's been helping to organize some parades in the southern part of the county. So if you're a precinct committee person and you live in the southern part of the county, if you live in New Freedom, Shrewsbury, Stewartstown, I know there's others, but go onto the events page, and you can sign up to march in the parade with our teams there. Things like the York Fair will be posted on there in the coming weeks, so that you can sign up for shifts for that if you would like. These are all events that are outside of the role of a precinct committee person, but certainly they are ways to get engaged and stay engaged. And if other folks in your area are looking for other things to do and other ways to volunteer, this is a great resource to give them as well, to say, hey, go on, sign up, and we'll get you the information that you need to help out at these events. And then that's it. That's it. We have a few minutes left. The contact information, if you're not familiar, we do have a Hanover office. That is the 130 Carlisle Street in Hanover. 216 East Market Street is the main headquarters. If you haven't been to our headquarters in the last 5 years, we are now on Market Street. We were elsewhere prior to that, but very accessible. Our website's there, and our phone number's there as well. A couple of things, like I said, that you can watch for. We will send you a link to this, to not only the presentation, but to the recording for the presentation. We'll also send you those precinct profile links. You will be starting to see, if you don't already have access to Vote Builder, you will start to see notifications that you've been given access to Vote Builder. What I'm going to suggest is keep an eye out for those, because those are, you have to log in within 48 hours of getting that access, or else that invite goes away, and then we have to do it again. It's not a problem for us to do it again, but just kind of keep an eye out. We will more than likely start to put those start to build that access out over the weekend. So you're going to kind of see, each of you will see it at different phases throughout the weekend when that access is granted. Um, so I think, there's a number of other things I know we talked about that you'll be getting from us as well. But we'll be following up. And if there's anything that you need, anything that we talked about that you don't get, please let me know, and we'll make sure that we get that information for you. I do want to we have like 5 minutes left. If there are any other questions, comments that folks have, be happy to take those at this point as well.
Hey Chad, this is Gail
Yes.
Manta. Hey,
Hi, Gail.
I have a neighbor that I talked to, and he said he's a liberal, but he didn't vote in the primary because he is just very upset with the nastiness of the candidates with the parties. Anything I can say to him to next time I talk to him, change his mind, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so one of the biggest things that we try to articulate is that a lot of times you see a lot of that nastiness coming from the top down. So we obviously are seeing a lot of that coming from DC. We're seeing some of that in Harrisburg, but not nearly as much. I would just tell them, do the research on our local candidates. You'll be back to provide information on our local candidates, but know that, most of them are looking to cut through some of that nastiness, and to not be presenting that as bad as it is right now. But also, a lot of that is happening in DC, and outside of our congressional candidates. That's that's the only kind of federal candidate that's on the ballot this year. So these local elections are a little bit less the nastiness. I see Cliff also pointed out, and it's important as well. We do have a lot of local groups as well. We have our Northern New York Democrats. We have our Federation of Democratic Women. We have the Mason-Dixon for Democracy group in the southern part of the county. Those are great groups to go to. There's not, they're friendly groups. They're not going to be, spewing out some of the nasty talking points that they're going to hear elsewhere. And even if he goes to one meeting and just, sits in and listens and makes those connections, I think that opens up that dialogue as well. So that's a good way for them to be involved.
That's a good idea. Thank
this
you.
is Connie. Encourage him to stop watching Fox News.
Well, that too. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think he does watch it, but he says he doesn't pay any attention to.
Yeah. Sean, I see your note as well that
politics at all anymore, and that worries me a little bit.
Yeah. Sean, I see your note about you hear a lot about I don't like either side. That's again where I think having those conversations is going to be important. You may not persuade a voter the first 3, 4, 10 times that you talk to them. But if you do have a dialogue with them, and that's part of, you probably have heard a lot about deep canvassing of late. That's something that the DNC is actually now promoting more. The Shapiro campaign is working on that as well. And that's literally where you go and you have a conversation with a voter, as opposed to just standing there and saying, that you should be for this and this issue, and you should be this way on this issue, and you should be voting for this candidate. It's actually having a conversation and relating to the voters on their doorsteps. Part of the reason why folks don't like either side is because both sides have ignored voters for a while. And that's true on the Republican and the Democratic side. And that's why having these individual conversations, having these local conversations with you as the precinct committee person to voters sometimes can break that stigma of it's us against them or Republicans versus Democrats. It's having that conversation, to just listen. Sometimes folks just want somebody to listen to them, and that's going to be important as well as you go through this position. Question: are we allowed to announce that we are the PCP in our area? Also, absolutely, yeah. You can put it wherever you want. By all means, please, share that out, and let folks know that you are the precinct committee person. Again, sometimes it just helps that they know that, oh my gosh, there's another Democrat in my area. And I think I saw Jim on here earlier. Jim Shira from the southern part of the county talks about how he was out knocking doors last year, knocked on a door. A couple was like, oh wow, we didn't even know there were other Democrats in the neighborhood. He showed them a list and said, here they are. And then they actually watched him go down the street and knock on other Democrats' doors. And sometimes it's just getting other, volunteers to recognize they're not alone in their neighborhoods and that they have other people to talk to. So whether it's sharing it on social media, whether it's knocking on their door, those things are important. And that just reminded me of something Robin said earlier. Please, 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 when you're talking to folks, get their contact information. Make sure you get their phone numbers. Make sure you get their email addresses. Make sure that you're inputting that information into Vote Builder as well, because it's important that we have that information updated. The information that is in Vote Builder comes from two places. It comes from the voter rolls, from the offices of elections in your areas, but it also comes from input by volunteers in campaigns. So the more accurate information is going to be that information that you're putting in. So it's always important to be able to do that. And as Robin indicated earlier, some of you are going to be in areas where it's going to be really tough to get out and talk to voters and knock on every door. But if you have the ability to make a phone call, to send a postcard, to send an email, post on social media, that is critical as well. So make sure you get that information. Steve, I saw your question about recording. Absolutely, this is recorded. We're going to have this information sent out to everyone. There's a lot of folks that weren't able to make it tonight, so we're going to make sure they have the recording as well. But you will have not only the recording, but I'll send you the slide deck so that you have all that information too.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Well, again, I want to express my gratitude for you all stepping up into these roles. Again, we cannot exist as a party without the grassroots team, and that is you 100%. So whatever we can do to help you through this process, whatever we can do, whatever resources we can try to get to you, we will do that. And certainly, as always, feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. Feel free to reach out to me. Any of the team that's listed on the website, I would encourage you to reach out to them as well. Most of them have had a lot of experience. Some are new and ready to jump in and get more experience. So definitely reach out with any questions that you might have. All right. Well, with that, I'm not going to prolong your stay here any longer. So again, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. And we will be in touch very soon. Again, thank you for the work that you're doing and the work that you're about to do. So thanks, everyone.